She told me at my wife's funeral, yes, right there under the tent, while rain hammered the canvas, 12 acres your grandfather left you. We're taking it. Your old deed is worthless. Sign it over, or we'll make your life hell. I remember the words like a slap, because the only thing I could think to do was hold my wife's hand a little tighter and pretend I wasn't hearing anything at all. I'm Dalton Merrick, and grief makes you small, but it doesn't make you stupid, not forever. 2 weeks later, chain link fence ringed the pecan orchard where I'd proposed to Cheryl, where lightning bugs used to flicker, and where the old tree we called the Patriarch used to throw its shade over our daughter's first swing. Bulldozers chewed through trunks with the same efficient indifference the world uses to swallow a life. 70 years of shade gone in 30 seconds, and 18 months after that, there were 22 glass storefronts where my grandfather's dirt had been. Diane Whitaker spent $4.8 million putting up Heritage Plaza bright under the Texas sun, and she never once ran a survey that mattered. If you want the short version, the one that makes great comments and gets shared over coffee here, it is they thought my grief would make me easy. They were wrong. This is the long version, and it's messy, but it's mine. Cheryl died May 15th, 2024 in our bedroom after 14 months of chemo that felt like a war nobody wins. We were high school sweethearts, married 38 years, the kind of couple who had routines so small they were sacred lasagna on Sundays, bad movies, and worse popcorn. Her laugh when my jokes landed a little crooked. After the funeral, we had a backyard reception under a rented tent because 50 people won't fit in a living room. And while people said the words you say at a funeral, Diane Whitaker walked up with a sympathy card in one hand and a Tupperware of funeral ham in the other, and told me flat as a headline that she was taking my land. Who does that? Who threatens a man who just lost his wife over casserole and rain? Diane's smile was the kind that shows teeth and nothing else. Real estate, polished smile, a white Lexus with a vanity plate that read, "Sold for you." She knew me by name, knew the deed, knew the land. She thought she could scare me into signing it away. She was banking on the fact that grief will make you invisible. 3 days later, I woke to chainsaws. I put on jeans, drove 10 minutes down to Bramble Creek Road, and found orange barriers, a bulldozer idling like a sleeping animal, and men in hard hats pointing at a tablet like the world was already theirs. I told the foreman this was my land. He tapped his tablet and said, "According to this, you don't." The tablet said the county approved permits and that the owner was an LLC with Diane's name attached. The bulldozer dropped its blade. It cut into the Patriarch's roots, and the tree folded a long, heartbreaking crack that smelled like sawdust and diesel, and for an instant like Cheryl's perfume. I called 911. The deputy said gently, "This is a civil matter. Get a lawyer." So I did the thing people do when they're desperate and not yet defeated. I Googled affordable property lawyer Austin and found Roland Pike, who worked out of a converted garage, and answered the phone on the second ring. Roland looked at my 1947 deed, looked at me over his glasses, and said the words that turned panic into possibility. "Your deed recorded first in time it controls. If there are physical monuments markers, they beat a later correction." He also said quietly, "The surveyor who filed that 2022 correction works for Whitaker and Sons. This looks planned." Planned. My jaw went cold. It wasn't an accident. It was a land grab. Medical bills had painted me into a corner. Cheryl's care funerals, I had $3,400 in checking and an ocean of paperwork. Roland agreed to work contingency. He'd take 35% if we win. He didn't do it for the money. He did it because he'd been watching people like Diane his whole life and got tired of watching. We started digging. I found a concrete surveyor's marker, half-buried hand-carved Merrick 1947 after a smaller tree fell wrong during their clearing. It was 200 feet east of where their tablet said the line was. 200 feet is a lot of land. 200 feet is the difference between a pecan orchard and a glass storefront. Kendall Shaw, a licensed surveyor and ex-Army Corps engineer I hired after selling Cheryl's CRV for the survey fee, spent 3 days with fancy equipment and old-school transit tools. Her report, October 28th, said every building sat on Merrick property per the 1947 deed margin of error, plus or minus 0.3 feet. That little plus or minus was my salvation. But surveys alone don't make enemies blush, proof of intent does. That came when Anime Cho, a retired ESL teacher who used to be HOA secretary, slid a piece of paper across a diner table and said, "You need to see this." Anime had copies of HOA emails Diane thought she'd deleted. One of them, March 2018, from Diane to Todd Brennan, surveyor. The 1947 Merrick deed shows 12 acres in our commercial zone. Can you make the numbers work? Owner probably won't notice. Todd replies, "I can file an administrative correction." Diane, perfect. Do it. Later, June 2022, survey correction filed. If Dalton notices later, possession is 9/10 of the law. Reading those emails, I felt something leave me and something come back. Not peace, not yet, but purpose. She had planned it. She had gambled I'd be too broken to fight. She misread the one variable she couldn't control: people. People like Roland, who called the DA. Anime, who handed over emails in the middle of the night. Luther Gaines, the HVAC guy who installed the systems and knew where the master shutoffs were. Marcus, my son, an Army Ranger who came home and organized a logistics plan like it was an operation. Kendall with her stakes. And Jessa Whitfield, the investigative reporter who agreed to sit on the story until our day. We had a ragtag platoon and a plan that was either brilliant or insane: expose her publicly at the grand opening. We knew the law. Texas Adverse Improvement Doctrine says if someone builds on your land knowing it's yours, the trespasser doesn't profit. The owner can claim the improvements. That turns $4.8 million of stolen buildings into the Widows Community Center. But proving knowledge, that's the key. Diane's emails were the smoking gun. The surveyor's forged correction, the grant application for $2.1 million, the rushed construction. All of it showed intent. We staked the boundary lines in December at night, 24 orange stakes with QR codes linking to the deed and our evidence. Marcus built a website. Kendall remarked the true corners. Luther installed emergency shutoffs at every junction point that crossed my property. Water electrical fiber labeled them property of Dalton Merrick, emergency use only. No sabotage, just leverage. Document everything. Cameras, motion sensors, cloud backups. Anime kept every email in 3 places. Roland filed a quiet title action just slow enough to not spook her, and then we waited for the day Diane would stand in front of the cameras thinking she owned the world. It was genius, and it was risky. Mostly it felt right. I set up the Cheryl Merrick Community Trust and signed papers that meant if we won, the plaza would be for the community scholarships, affordable leases for local and minority-owned businesses, veteran job training, not Diane's personal bank account. I wanted justice, not revenge. Valentine's Day 2025 arrived like fate. The mayor, the news vans, the ribbon. Diane in red and heels, a tent that could have been the same rental company as the one at Cheryl's funeral. We arrived separately, unremarkable me in my grandfather's old survey vest, Marcus in dress uniform for presents, Roland rumpled and ready. Kendall planted surveyor flags in full view. When Diane tried to shoo her off, the sheriff's deputy checked Kendall's license and said, "If she's a licensed surveyor, I can't remove her." That's when the air changed. We walked up like a slow wave. I held up the 1947 deed in a plastic sleeve. I told them loud enough for the cameras that the deed said otherwise, and that I had proof Diane knew about it. The mayor's face went from ceremonial to scared in seconds. Jessa Whitfield started streaming live. Roland handed binders to the officials. I read the March 2018 email into a microphone owner probably won't notice. Let's move forward. The words landed like bricks. Everything unraveled in 20 minutes. The Horizon investor went white. Lawyers started dialing. The sheriff asked Diane to come to the station to answer questions. She left in cuffs later that afternoon. The ribbon never got cut. The plaza sat, glass-dark Valentine's decorations fluttering in an empty parking lot, the most expensive ghost town I'd ever seen. In the months that followed, the legal dominoes fell. Diane charged with survey and grant fraud. Todd loses his license. Kyle flips and cooperates. Diane pleads guilty to reduced charges, loses her license and flees the state. Civil court confirmed my ownership and the improvements. Horizon settled. We refinanced, paid Cheryl's bills, paid Roland, gave bonuses to the team, and the Cheryl Merrick Community Trust took over. Starbucks stayed, but rents were restructured. Local and minority-owned businesses moved in. Veterans got job training, and Mariana Lopez, the first recipient of our STEM scholarship, cried in my arms on stage when I told her we were putting this to work for people, not profit. What did I learn? 3 things, and I say them plain because they change lives. First, old deeds matter. Don't assume a survey or a smiling developer knows better than the record. Spend the $5,000 on a real survey. It saved me millions. Second, document everything: emails, photos, videos, because truth has a paper trail, and people like Diane keep writing confessions with their keyboards. Third, property law protects owners if you can prove knowledge built on stolen land. Knowing it's stolen, you can lose everything you built. Karma isn't mystical here, it's statutory. But the moral I keep to myself, the one that doesn't sound like legal advice, is quieter. Grief makes you vulnerable, yes, and it also sharpens what matters. I almost let the world take what my grandfather and Cheryl and I loved because the cost of fighting felt too high. It took losing Cheryl to understand that some fights aren't about winning money. They're about making sure memory and decency survive in places where vultures would plant glass and call it progress. The trust isn't a monument to my stubbornness. It's a way to turn theft into something that feeds people. That's the kind of justice that sticks. So yeah, Diane Whitaker lost an empire. We replanted pecan saplings where the patriarch stood. They'll take decades to be shade again, but they're in the ground. The Cheryl Merrick Community Plaza hosts a bookstore and a child care co-op and a veterans training center. The HOA rewrote bylaws to ban conflicts of interest. Roland won more cases. Anime runs civic classes. Luther finally stopped getting petty violation notices. Marcus left the army, came home, and now he's building, not breaking. Now I'll leave you with the question that keeps the comment section honest. Where do we draw the line between fighting for what's yours and becoming the person you swore you'd never be? Is public shaming and legal ambush the right answer when the courts are slow and the powerful move fast? Or does that risk turning justice into spectacle? Tell me where you stand. Drop your state, tell me your HOA horror story, or tell me a time you watched someone get what they deserved or didn't. If you've been ripped off, what did you do? Share your story, because stories are how we teach each other to stand up. And if you took anything from this, check your deed, document everything, and don't let grief make you invisible. If you like this, share it, leave your thoughts below. And if you're in HOA hell, say where you are. I'll read them. Because grief taught me 2 things. Fight for what you love, and when you win, make sure it helps other people.
Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video. Cảm ơn các bạn đã xem video.